Thank you very much. My name is Richard Hartigan, and I lead omnichannel retail at Pinterest in the UK. I am delighted to be here today because I wanted to share some of the key outputs of some research we conducted with a company called Amplified into attention, and specifically how the quality of this attention impacts outcomes for the advertisers that use our platform. But I also think the learnings are transferable across other platforms, other networks, and essentially in all advertising. If you're familiar with Pinterest, you'll know that you come to the platform to plan something. You've got something in mind, you have some intent, you have an action that you want to take. That could be planning a wedding or planning a renovation or a room extension, which are often common tasks that people take up on Pinterest. But it could also be planning a dinner, planning a night out, or planning for a loved one's birthday ideas. This intentional audience that we have on Pinterest is the key reason why, compared to other visual media platforms, that people scroll on Pinterest less, right? So they're inclined to pay more attention to Pinterest versus elsewhere because they've come there with a purpose, they've come there with something to do already. And Amplified talk about attention in two ways. One, we have our passive attention. So this is efficient, it's reinforcing, it drives longer term goals. And we have active attention. So this is actually doing, seeing, things we're very much focused on at the same time. And this with an animation that I am so proud of. I'm going to do it again. I'm so proud of the work that went into that animation. This has a synergistic effect, right? One reinforces the other. And these things need to happen at the same time to be as effective as they possibly can. So when we look at it together, there becomes an equation whereby we look at total attention, and then we studied what we would call attention amplifiers. So these are the things and the variables that you can change along the way using attention in order to drive what we all want, better business outcomes. So let's cover those four types of amplifiers that we've got here. So the first one is about context. And it's very, very obvious, right? When you see ads within a relevant context, you're going to pay more attention to them. Does anyone in this room play paddle? Hands up if you play paddle. Okay, it looks like I'm going to be struggling for a match. I was hoping to get some more games. So I'm learning how to play paddle at the moment, right? And so this is my feed on Pinterest that you'll see here. And so I'm learning about the ways to do it and how to hit. The key to hit with effortless power. That's the secret we all want, right? But this is an advert here, placed within context, original paddle material, this T-shirt, maybe, right? It's contextually relevant. Of course, I'm going to be spending more attention to that than I am something that's completely out of context and landing on my feed in the wrong way. On Pinterest, ads are part of content, so we try our best to ensure that all of the advertising sits within the content of our users or the context of our users as they scroll and search on our platform. The second one is the audience, and I think it will come as no surprise to anyone here that the younger the audience, the less attention they spend on media. And so at Pinterest, we talk about expanding your audience where at all possible. If you're targeting a Gen Z audience, then you might want to think about expanding to younger millennials, older millennials, if the attention is something that you want to drive. But if you're fixed on targeting some of those younger demographics, then it's really, really important to focus on the creative. And at Pinterest, we have tons of best practice about how to reach different audiences and grab their attention, regardless of what stage of the funnel, what audience you're targeting. We have lots of best practice for that. The third one, I love this, is it's about the content itself and about the people pay more attention to creative and content that makes them happy, that invokes emotions of happiness and surprise and delight along the way. And people are going to spend more time watching those. And I think, obviously, all of advertising itself is meant to be positive and invoke those, but really dialing up the positivity is proven to drive that attention. We're creating an emotional connection to people along the way, I think is absolutely fantastic. Pinterest is a positive platform. We engineer our platform for positivity in all cases. We don't drive for any negative signals on our platform. It's all about optimizing for positivity, and that's why people come to Pinterest. The fourth one we tested was about different formats, and there's lots of different formats you can use on Pinterest, but specifically here, we tested statics versus video. And yeah, anyone familiar with Pinterest will know that we are a visual platform, and so we're testing different types of visual. And what we found is that by using the combination of the two together, drove not only better attention, but better sales uplift. So when you're planning campaigns on Pinterest, or it could be anywhere else, it's worth thinking about the assets that you've got being static and motion in terms of video to be the most effective. So when we tied this all together, ultimately, when you're using the amplifiers of audience, context, creative, targeting, we saw almost a 3 times improvement in the amount of attention that people would pay versus the norm of the advertising that we'd see on Pinterest, versus our average. And we really dialed up those amplifiers. And so with that knowledge, I would ask anyone, if you have the information of what's going to drive better business outcomes, dialing up those amplifiers, why would you not use them in all campaigns? Thank you. That was my high energy 5 minutes. If you'd like to speak more, these are my details. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Matt. Recently joined Boots as the Omnichannel and Media Director. So listen, I'm going to take you through some work that we've been doing at Boots and really how we are sort of building on being the most trusted retailer in the UK. All right, so let's go into this. So the most amazing thing that we're lucky to have at Boots is that ultimately we're the most trusted retailer in the UK. And I think when people ask me why I went to Boots, you can very quickly see the magnetic pull that most people naturally feel when you say you actually work at Boots. Everyone knows it, the awareness is high, but actually what's amazing is it fundamentally is trusted by consumers every day. And that's not because they just shout the loudest, that's not because they're just constantly thinking about reach. It's ultimately about driving real attention. And why that is the case is ultimately no one knows the health, wellness, and beauty customers like Boots does. Right? That people go to it for pharmacy first advice, whether it's supporting new mums, or whether it's for having a show-stopping beauty moment, right? Every moment is naturally part of a consumer journey in a day-to-day life for our customers. And the brilliant thing is that the Boots Media Group is able to then make sure that our brand partners are in the path for the right consumers at the right time. Whether that's, for example, baby brands for first-time mums, whether that's beauty brands when you want to have that sort of uplifting moment. And that's why actually when we say with you for life, it's not a tagline. It really is the purpose and something that we truly believe and lead through. So then the question that was briefed to me was like, how do we ultimately turn that trust into attention, right? I'll give you the sort of 3 things that I've immediately seen since joining recently at Boots. Those 3 things, first of all, would be to call out the fact that consistent clarity is key. Yeah? Consistency in terms of how we talk to consumers, whether it's the way in which we engage with them, but having a clear messaging with the way in which we want to have that stories come to life is fundamental to making sure that there is a consistent, clear, precise message and relationship with our customers. We also spend a lot of time trying to go deeper than is naturally obvious. Rory mentioned it earlier on, and I think it's really key for me, especially from my background. It's really not about the short-term ROI always. It can't be. It's about building that longer-term engagement and connection with customers. Because ultimately, if you know your customer and you know your consumer, you can put them at the heart of your plans, and it ultimately plays through as a consumer-centric engagement model. And that's fundamentally shaped and shifted how Boots has done marketing over the last few years. Not just brand marketing, but also how retail media comes to life for our partners. A good example here is most recently the campaign where we've tried to take Booty and really identify how, yes, if we want to engage that Gen Z audience, first of all, yes, putting the right creators into the plan is fundamental. But actually handing over the sort of engagement to sort of build that consistent storytelling so it feels authentic to the creators and partners that we're sort of trying to do work with, that allows there to be a more realistic and authentic connection with our customers. 2 other things to call out here as well. The visual identity. Ultimately, there was a new, strong visual identity which resonated better with the core consumer. It allowed also brands to come through and be part of the plans instead of it just being shoehorned in. Retail media isn't about just doing these tactical moments. It's about making sure that we can share and engage with that trust with our right partners, with the consumers at the right time. And then the last thing we'll call out here, and actually Rory touched on it earlier on, is the concept of actually failing fast and failing forward. We have to allow ourselves to actually try things and innovate into new spaces that may feel a little bit uncomfortable at times. But that is from that we'll actually learn, and so that we can have sort of short-term memory to actually think about what worked and what didn't, and we can go on to the next step. That's the key steps for Boots. That's how we're building out our marketing plans, and that's how we're making sure our retail media network is, in essence, fundamental to how we connect with consumers. That's it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I am the MD of Media and Commerce at Mail Metro Media. I was briefed to talk about how we capture attention and how we hold on to it, and it is something that is absolutely fundamental to everything we do. So I'm going to riff slightly off the retail topic of today, but it will all hopefully come back around in the end. So we essentially are living, and I'm sure everybody in this room feels it, we've spoken about it quite a lot today, where we have 100 priorities, everything needs to be done at once, everything has 100 stakeholders to sign off on across the business. And this complexity is, we wake up every day and there's a new thing that's been announced, a new thing to be kind of concerned about. And I think one of the things that we've taken from that is how can we, in this incredible era of change, really focus in on what is the North Star of everything we do, which is creating content that is incredibly high value to our users and high value to the brands that we partner with. So what does that look like? So we have huge ambitions to be the largest content creator across all of those platforms. And this is obviously developing faster than ever before. So in doing that, once upon a time where we might have been able to create content and then try and retrofit it, this is something that now requires teams of experts creating across each of the different channels in something that's completely right for that audience. And it allows them to fail fast. So if something's working, great, let's do more, we can lean in. If something's not working or the news changes, we can pivot, and you actually see them running around during the day to film something, going out on the street, going into stores to try and capture that zeitgeist of everything that's happening. So we see that across all of the different channels that we operate on, and these are very different audiences across each of those channels. Just going to focus in on TikTok for this. So really the focus here is how do we capture the attention of a very, very young audience. And I love this stat because our billion engagements on TikTok have been described as having the gravitational pull of a neutron star. So we're obviously doing something right. But if I defer to them on what really works and what is making us so successful on these channels, they call out three things, the secret sauce of their success. The first being that it is incredibly recognizable. You see our content, you know that it's from us, and you know what you're engaging with, and your attention is stopped in the scroll. The second is that it is repeatable. So we are producing that over and over and over. It's highly recognizable. You see it in your feed. It stops you mid-scroll. And we're able to continue to iterate on that with an evolving news cycle, with our brand partners, with all of the different things that we want to change. And then the third thing is that it's very, very relatable. So I'm sure I'm not the first to say that authenticity is key when you're speaking on any of the channels, and that's true across all the different audiences. I would actually add a fourth to this, which is that it is rewarding. And we see that in our users give us immediate feedback based on how long they're spending with it, how much attention we're capturing, how much time they're spending, and how engaged they are with our content. And that kind of is the trade-off that we're working to here. Like, how do we make this high value? Now, with a news story, it's really easy. So with something like the boxing or reporting from the Golden Globes, it's really easy to see how that translates to the social platforms. Something, and I've used this example because it's slightly the opposite end of the scale, how do we do that when it's about the budget? Something that's much less exciting, but it really goes to show that the team are constantly thinking about how do they create the agenda, set the agenda, capitalize on exactly what's happening, how to tell that story, and being really, really dialed into telling those stories in the way that works for the different audiences. Now, in addition to obviously reporting on the culture and everything that is happening in the news cycle, we're also looking consistently at what is trending. So this is everything that's happening on our own channels, but also increasingly using AI and other platform tools to actually scrape what products are working, what's happening, what's everyone talking about everywhere else, and using that to feed into our content and what we're producing in pretty much real time, which is quite an insane feat to take on. So yeah, this is certainly an area of more and more investment in terms of how we will be able to create more and more content. And then lastly, obviously we've got to bring it back to retail for the topic of today. By doing all of this to capture attention and to be part of people's daily habits and being something that's completely recognizable, we build that trust, which then means that we have the authority and we have the voice to actually say, no, we have tested this and we really recommend it. So increasingly, we're seeing that commerce is just hand in hand with the content that we are producing, in that it is all linked to how we can seamlessly weave products and our recommendations and reviews all the way through any of this content. And actually, I'm not going to talk about data today, but our commerce and everything that we're seeing, all of the transaction data that we get from on-site, is fueling our wider data signals, which essentially is the crux of our full funnel proposition, which is obviously we can drive fame, we can create content, we can, across the huge scale of our platforms, we're able to deliver that reach, sort of your classic media metrics. But then the attention and how long people are spending with us and just how much content that they turn over across all of our different platforms. And then finally, the fact that that attention is increasingly driving through to trust and conversion. So we start to see that in like the classic media metrics. And this for me, I think Rory mentioned it, I think his first picture was the handover of last click to brand building. This is where we really need to lean in and try and use the data that we have to stitch that all together into these full funnel solutions. And that's not just across our platforms and our content, that's as a wider industry across the whole ecosystem. And that's it from me. Thank you so much.